was last time, yeah. Okay. We'll sit at the edge. Are you all right? That's all. It sounds like you guys are in attendance. Yeah. He could do it. We want to expect to have it. Last time we had it, we were expecting it. If you like it, so I think we'll probably get it. He's got a visit. Yeah. Now you knew that next Monday there was some. Yeah. I I'll do because I saw it's almost too
Okay, folks, could I have your attention, please? I'd like to call to order and welcome everyone to the June 3rd, 2021 meeting of the Central River Basin Commission. It is great to see lots of people in person for the first time in a year and a half. Certainly appreciate all of you who took the tent this morning, and welcome obviously those who are online attending this morning too.
Super, thank you, Dara. So first of all, I got to thank you guys for turning out here today. Earlier in the week, I was really scrambling. I was afraid we weren't going to get a quorum, so I'm like calling around, and I am just really humbled by when people make the trip over here to Goshen. Maybe it's what Dara said, you just haven't seen each other in so long, you're anxious to get together. I like to think you're trying to help out a friend, which is me. But I really appreciate it. And I also want to thank, before we get into things, I want to thank the city of Goshen, not only for providing the space, but helping us with the technology. They've been an incredible partner on stuff, helping get set up today. And I just really appreciate all their help. So before we do a formal roll call, I do always like to start by a little bit of background on why we're all here today. You know, the St. Joe River Basin is a huge area, about 5,000 square miles of land that drain to the St. Joe River. And although your county might not have the St. Joe River in it, it's got land that's draining there. And the reason they created this whole thing is that it turns out what we do on that land is what makes the biggest impact on the river. You know, the origin story of the commission is around problems, and that started off with water quality problems. We wanted to promote economic development, recreation, fishing, kayaking, canoeing, all that kind of stuff, but the river wasn't meeting water quality standards. So they said, you know, we better form a commission to try and figure that out. We're still trying to figure that out, and now we got some new problems. Folks, you know, Noble County know we got too much water sometimes, and we got right now, some places, especially on the other side of the state line, don't have enough water. Irrigation intakes on some of our trips don't have water coming into them. So we got quantity problems, we got quality problems, and so we're all getting here together 4 times a year to try and make things better and hold good what's good. So our enabling statute does empower us to work cooperatively with Michigan, but our funding and our governance lies entirely on the Indiana side. So we do talk about Indiana side stuff a lot here, but we do try to look at the whole 15 counties that drain to the St. Joe. Okay. This slide's got tons of text. It's what we were created for. It spells it all out. If we ever want to reference it back, we can go back to it. But the idea is provide a forum for discussion, study, and evaluation of water resources. This is that forum. We want to foster cooperative planning. Who we are, we've got an incredible group here. It's about 5 members from every county. We're going to go through roll call and get into this, but from each county, we have a member from the municipality, the largest municipalities in the county, commissioner's health officer, surveyor's office, and soil and water. So we've got a good makeup, a lot of stakeholders involved in watershed management, and I think this is a good cross-section. Okay, there are some folks who are on the computer today, and I appreciate you being here. We're going to catch you at roll call. In general, though, you want to leave your mics muted. And, you know, I think Zach and some of the staff at MACOG are helping me with managing that. So if you do use the chat feature or the raise hand feature, that can get brought to myself or the chair's attention that you have a comment you'd like to make. I just mentioned MACOG over in the beginning. My name is Matt Mearsman. I am technically an employee of the Michigan Area Council of Governments, but we work cooperatively. We provide a staffing solution for the River Basin Commission, so I serve the River Basin Commission in that capacity. Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. Next item, and this applies to everybody. I mean, it was really important when we were doing our virtual meetings, but when we make a motion or we second a motion, it's really important to state your name when you do that. That way we can make sure we get it recorded in the minutes. And we always used to do that, but now it's also because occasionally we could have folks joining us online. We will be roll call votes today on everything. We'll talk more about that in a little bit, but this new reality that we have coming back and also having people online, our statute is going to require us to do roll call votes. So we're going to talk more about that. First, though, a roll call. I'm gonna go through county by county, and I'm gonna ask if you're here. I'm gonna try and keep track of this because I'm gonna have to use this as we do each of our roll call votes. So I'm gonna start with Elkhart County, and first from the mayor's office of the city of Elkhart. I guess what I'd like you to do, if you could, state your name, if you have an affiliation, you know, or what you do for work. If you're not the mayor of Elkhart, let us know that, and I'm going to call it kind of by, you know, the city, county, that kind of thing, and then if you can state your name, that we'll go from there. Sorry, I'm stumbling around a little bit. All right.
Thanks, Matt. Dara G, and obviously chairman of the St. Joe River Basin Commission, and representative or proxy for Mayor Rod Robertson here at the city.
And what you do for work?
Yep, thanks. I work as an aquatic biologist for the city.
Thanks, Dara. And I only say that because a lot of you guys, even if you're not the member themselves, what you do for work is very relevant to what we do as a commission. So I think it's important to share that. Okay, so from the county commissioners.
I'm Frank Case, county commissioner. I filled in for Brad Rogers, but I'm a past member.
Thanks a lot, Frank. How about from the health office, from health department?
I'm Bill Hartson, on-site program supervisor in the Elkhart County Health Department, and I'm health officer, representative for Dr. Bethany Wake.
Perfect. Thanks, Bill. And from the surveyor's office? I know Phil Barker was planning to be here, but I'm not checking yet. So, and I don't see Steve here, so we're going to move past. How about from soil and water?
Jim does, district manager is SJRBC.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, we're going to move into Kosciuszko County. First of all, from the city of Syracuse, town of Syracuse. Larry Siegel here? No. Okay. How about from the county commissioners?
Aaron Roberts, I
I represent the county commissioners, been active in the soil and water conservation district for years, and I have a farming operation in the northwestern Syracuse area.
Thank you, John. How about from the health department in Kosciuszko? We sometimes have Bob Weaver. All right, how about from the surveyor's office?
Mike is here, Kosciuszko County Surveyor.
Awesome, great to have you here, Mike. And soil and water.
Jewel Wise, board supervisor for Conservation of Water. Outside of that, my family runs a retail garden center in Northwestern.
Thanks, Jewel. Okay, we're gonna move into LaGrange County and start with town LaGrange. I know we got.
Ray Hoover, Conlon Range, Council President, retired.
Thanks, Ray. And from the county commissioners?
Martin Franke, proxy. I don't know if Peter's here today, is he?
I don't think so. You can pipe up online if you
So I'm a proxy for the LaGrange County Commissioners, serve as district manager for the LaGrange County Soil and Water Conservation District.
Thank you, Martin. Anybody from the health department in LaGrange? Jared nicely comes. See him? All right. How about, I know that nobody from the surveyor's office, Zach Holsinger and Steve Vaughn, both told me they wouldn't be able to make it today. So from LaGrange Soil and Water?
Don Hunter, I'm retired from the LaGrange County Soil and Water Conservation District, worked with the district for over 25 years.
Awesome. Thank you, Don. And from Noble County, from the city of Kendallville?
I'm Sue McGee, City of Kendallville Mayor's Representative. I'm MS4 Coordinator for the City of Kendallville, and a lab technician for the wastewater department.
Lots of hats. Thanks, Sue. And from the county commissioners?
Anita Hess, Noble County Commissioner, so I'm a real estate broker in Central County, Bradley.
Thanks, Anita. I do want to acknowledge that Dan Lash is also here, which is Anita's proxy. He's staying informed, and we appreciate that.
I'm her fill-in boy.
Thank you, Dan. All right, how about from the health department?
Jason Griffin, works for the health department. I'm here representing Terry Gaffney, Health Officer.
Thanks. Thanks, Jason. All right, and from surveyor's office?
Randy Sexton, surveyor.
Thanks, Randy. And don't believe we have anybody from Noble County Soil and Water here. All right. From St. Joe County, how about the city of Mishawaka?
Adam Bellman, Assistant Director of Engineering, City of Mishawaka, proxy for Mayor Dave.
I got ahead of my slides and people are helping me out. I appreciate it, I think. Back on. Sorry, guys. All right. How about from the city of South Bend? I think Kieran was going to join remotely. I don't know if, yes. Kieran, can you let us know you can hear us and we can hear you?
Hi, folks. Yeah, I can hear you. Just have my camera turned off at the moment, but yeah, I can hear you. So Kieran Fahy, representing the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, James Mueller, and I'm the director of Combined Sewer Overflow Long-Term Control Plan for the city of South Bend.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Karen. We now know that our little meeting owl device is working. Thank you so much. How about from the county commissioners from St. Joe? There? No. Okay. How about the health department? Didn't get an RSVP from anybody. Surveyor's office?
John Long, representing John McNamara County Surveyor, Director on Friends of the St. Joe River, and on Aquarius.
Thanks, John. How about from St. Joe County Soil and Water? I think Sarah is going to join us remotely.
I'm here, Sarah Longenecker. I'm the county conservationist with the St. Joe County Soil and Water Conservation District.
Perfect. Thank you, Sarah. And Steuben County. We're going to start with the City of Angola. I think Chris is on.
Yes, good morning. Chris Thomas, MS4 coordinator for the City of Angola, representing Mayor Dick Hickman.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. And I believe Commissioner Lichty is here.
Yes, this is Lenny Lichty, Commissioner, North District, Steuben County.
Awesome. Thank you, Lenny. Thanks so much for being here. Well, kind of here, right? You're taking time for us. You're making time for us. From the health department in Steuben.
Alicia Walsh, I am Chief Environmental Health Specialist, Administrator of the Health Department. I am also the proxy for Dr. Preston.
And I think you hold an office on this board, right?
Secretary of State.
Awesome. Thanks, Alicia. Okay, how about from Surveyor's Office?
Mike Ruff, Steuben County Surveyor.
Thanks, Mike. Soil and Water was going to join remotely Steuben County. Is Janelle with us? Doesn't look like it. Okay. Not mark her down. Okay, and last but certainly not least, I talk about the counties all the time because local government's where it happens, but we are technically a part of the Indiana DNR, and we have representation from the Indiana DNR on our board, and they're here with us today.
Rod Edgell, a biologist with the DNR, proxy for direct campaign worker.
Awesome, thanks so much, Rod. That's incredible turnout, and I'm going to be using the roll call that we have here as we go through votes. So Zach, if you let me know if anybody else joins remotely, because, and we'll explain this more, but people who are attending remotely by our statute, they can count towards votes. They can even count towards a quorum if we have a quorum in the room. So it doesn't really help us meet our quorum, but their votes do matter and they will count towards attendance. So that's it with introductions. I missed another slide for Steuben County. I'm sorry. It's being present in the room is a whole different thing. I'm not as hooked to this thing, which is great, and I appreciate you guys bearing with me through this. So, Dara?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I appreciate it. So we're going to move on to the agenda, and the first item is the consent agenda. This is a new process or item that's on our agenda. Matt briefly kind of discussed it in the email that he sent off to the board last week, and I'm going to do my best here and try and describe what I think is we're trying to attempt here, and then Brandy or Matt can jump in and reinforce or help me out with it. So based on some of the new processes with the way we meet and virtual meeting or hybrid kind of and in-person virtual meeting process that we're going through, we're going to have to do roll call votes, as Matt mentioned before. For a group our size, there's probably 25 people in attendance today, something like that. A roll call vote for reoccurring regular items like minutes and financial reports and that kind of thing is going to be pretty cumbersome. So the attempt is to try and put all that regular stuff, those regular approvals under one vote. Matt is still going to go through and describe some of these things. We're going to handle them like we typically would, with the exception of not doing a vote towards the end of those items and save it to the end and do it under one approval. A couple things I'll mention with it. One is if someone on the board doesn't want one of those items on the consent agenda, if they want to, like if something's controversial or something, they want to pull it out, I have the ability to pull that out of the consent agenda and put it somewhere else on the agenda, and we can treat it as a separate item and pull a roll call vote on it. And then I guess I'm talking to Matt a little bit more about this. If we have something like today, for example, that we discuss in detail, but decide not to vote on it today and save it to the next meeting, we have the ability to put it up on the consent agenda at the next meeting, where we don't have to discuss it in great detail. We just need a quick approval. I think we have the ability to do that. So I don't know if I described that pretty well.
Is this to be procedure from now on, or is this temporary?
I think that's the goal, yes. This will be the procedure, yeah, from now on. Yeah.
And so part of the, as long as we have even just one member attending virtually, we're required to do a roll call on it. So this is going to take, this month or this quarter, it's taken it from 4 additional roll calls down to 1. But that's the purpose of it. And I mean, if it works, I would like to keep doing it for time's sake.
And it's not unusual. A lot of boards put regular items like financial, accounts payable, minutes, approval, and just things that come up frequently or don't require a lot of explanation. A lot of boards use a consent agenda for those.
Does anyone have any other questions or discussion on this before we move into some further discussion on agenda items?
If someone was not present for this meeting, they can still group it all into it. Even though you weren't in attendance at the previous meeting.
Yes. You can still look at the minutes if you weren't there. Now, if for some reason you were, I don't know, maybe invoices get paid with your firm or something, you probably either want to request that the agenda, that I would be pulled out, or that you have say on that particular consent agenda vote, you can handle it either way, but it would only be for something like conflict.
And one of the items on the agenda today is to discuss the electronic meeting policy. Further on, I think Matt and Brandon will touch on that, so we'll discuss this a little bit more in detail. Hopefully it makes a little bit more sense. Any other questions at all on this new process? All right, let's move into the approval of minutes. So in the email that Matt sent around last week had the minutes from last meeting. I believe, Martin, you had one correction that we needed to make. Yourself and Steve Vaughn with LaGrange County were listed in the wrong place on the agenda, so we'll go ahead and correct that. Does anyone else have any other corrections or additions to the minutes from the last meeting? So I guess at the end, when we make that motion for the consent agenda, we'll also approve that amendment at the same time. Does that make sense? All right, so we'll move on and discuss the financials.
All right, a special thanks to Carla back at Maycock for help with the minutes. First item under financials is our financial report. We had a lot of contributions from local governments over the last quarter, so our net change in assets was negative last quarter, now we're in the positive. The big things to note on this, I think, so interest, I mean, we're getting close to we're gonna be budgeting later this meeting, so I did a year-end forecast on this financial statement, and some of the things that struck out to me, we were way behind on interest. The interest we're earning in our checking and savings account thing, which was really great prior to the pandemic. It was incredible how much we were earning in interest, has tanked. So we didn't bring in nearly as much in interest. The other items were just some small bank service charges, fortunately, also go down. We don't make a lot of interest. The kind of account we have doesn't charge us much for that, so we spent a lot less on our bank. And then travel and mileage was down. Wasn't traveling to as many meetings early in the year with COVID and everything. So the other thing I would note on here was a big savings under education and outreach due to the virtual format of the symposium. We ended up coming in way under on our education and outreach this year because of that virtual format. So I would like to, as I go through these, ask if there's any questions on each statement. So is there any questions on the financial statement, basically the profit and loss? If not, I will move into the balance sheet or the statement of net assets in your packet. This is basically a couple important numbers on here. One is down at the bottom, the total fund balance. That's how much money we got to work with. That's kind of like our savings account, if you will. That's what's in our pocket. And the other number is up at the top, total cash. That number is what's basically our check register balance, and I usually include a bank statement in the packets. I didn't this month, and so I stuck a slide in here. We're matched, we're right on. We didn't have any uncleared checks, so our bank account balance is the same as our cash account balance in our register. And I've thrown that slide in here for you guys since I skipped including it accidentally in the packet. We've got the typical accounts payable, our invoices to Maycock, and that's about it. Any questions on the balance sheet? Right? The last statement in our financial report is our cash flow statement. So this, unlike the other two, this is on a cash basis, but it does end on 3/31. Big changes from the last quarter are we did receive $19,000 closing out our grant with IU, our Grand Challenge grant, which helped us do planning in the North Branch of the Elkhart. So we got a big contribution from that. And we got a bunch of local government contributions over the last quarter. I'm going to note a couple of them that we have received since this report was made from the town of Syracuse, the city of South Bend, and the city of Elkhart, all provided their contributions either at or in one case in excess of what was requested. We do have only one member at this time who has not contributed yet. with our fiscal year coming up at the end of the month, I'm sort of scrambling to get with them to see if we're still going to be able to get in, but that's City of Kendallville. We're still working, Sue's been helpful with that. We're trying to see, I know things at Public Works, which is where we're normally funded at, are a little troublesome this year. So those are the main things I want to note on here. Checks listed down below. Any questions on the cash flow statement? All right. So the next item, if I could just keep moving through the consent agenda. All right, super. So the next item on the consent agenda is our claims. Very much just routine business this quarter. We just had each monthly invoice from MACOG, which covers our staffing and all of our regular expenses. We have invoices included in there. We've got invoices included in the packet for each of those MACOG items. And then we also have our legal fees for Randy's attendance at the meeting today. Any questions on the claims or invoices that were included in your packet? All right. Last item on the consent agenda is the renewal of our contract for legal services. Randy got this to me. It was included in your packet. The only changes to this are with the dates. So it's extended us out an additional 2 years. Therefore, we felt comfortable putting it on the consent agenda since there weren't any changes to it. Does anybody have any questions about our contract for legal services? I would just add that Randy's been super helpful to me, and I think at the price we're getting, I'm really grateful to have our counsel on it. So. All right. Any questions on legal contract? So those are my overview of all the items on the consent agenda. I know Dara mentioned and Randy mentioned that this is used by parks boards, by a lot of bigger cities, and they'll often not even talk. Your expectation as a board member is that you will have reviewed the consent agenda items prior to the meeting. I think we intend to still provide go through, we can ask questions and that kind of stuff, but ideally, we can take action at this time. I don't know, Randy, if you could, is there a recommended language for the motion that's made to accept the consent agenda, approve it, adopt it? What do we?
Since there were corrections in minutes, I would say today's would be to approve the consent agenda with the proposed changes to the minutes.
Perfect, thank you.
Ma'am, can I ask a question? Going back to the statement of financial activity, your notes, expected shortfall due to unmet requests from student county, could you explain that?
Oh yeah, so I guess in our budget, it would have been 2 years ago, we increased our basic operating expenses, which is like the bare bones of what we can run on. And that's the number that's divided up amongst the counties. And we increased our total amount that's divided up before we ever got Steuben County on board to begin with. I mean, they've been contributing a little, it's just not what was requested, and then when we increased it, it made that gap even greater. I think I noted at the last meeting, I'm gonna be there on Monday, making my plea to Linny, if she's still out there. But they have stepped up somewhere. It was $1,000, I think we're up to $3,500, we're asking for $6,000, but they've been increasing. I think we've got some advocates there, I think. And hopefully with time we'll get there. But that's what that was about. And it turns out, due to the timing of some things, I think we're going to be real close, but we won't hit that 63,000 that we were shooting for, 63,660, primarily because of that shortfall, but also potentially because of Kendallville. If we don't get Kendallville on, that's I had it in my notes. I think it's like $3,000 or something like that. So, yep. Anything else? Thanks, Martin.
And with that, I guess I'll ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda with the changes for the minutes from the last meeting.
So great.
It was a great move. Thank you.
I'll second.
Anita Hess. Right, so we got a motion.
Oh, you're good, man. No problem.
I do that job at another board I'm on, sorry.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. Any further discussion?
Just a small correction.
on the claim submitted for Commissioner Buick. Can you change my last name, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
On the sign board, yes. That's not related to the motion, you just note to me,
No,
gotcha,
yes,
I gotcha.
like that.
I got you on your name tag, but I missed you on this.
Yep.
Any further discussion? All right, Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you for a roll call vote.
All right, thanks, Dora. Okay, Dara Deegan, can you just respond with a yes or a no?
Yes.
Frank Lucchese,
Yes.
Bill Hartsoff,
Yes.
Jim Hess, John Roberts,
Yes.
Mike Kissinger,
Yes.
Jewel Weiss,
Yes.
Ray Hoover,
Yes.
Martin Fromke,
Yes.
Donna Hunter,
Yes.
Sue McGee,
Yes.
Anita Hess,
Yes.
Jason Pippinger,
Yes.
Randy Sexton,
Yes.
Adam Bowden,
Yes.
Kieran Fahey,
Yes. Yes.
John Walker, got
Yes.
it. Sarah Longenecker,
Yes.
Chris Thomas,
Yes.
Lenny Lichty,
Yes.
Alicia Walsh,
Yes.
Mike Ruff,
Yes.
Ron Edgell.
Yes.
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thanks. Do we have a number?
We do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 23.
Thanks, Matt. So we have, motion passes 23-0. Thanks a lot. I guess we'll move on in the agenda here to old business, with the first item being existing projects.
Yeah, so as those of you who've been coming to these meetings know, it encompasses a lot of the work we do. This is down under the special projects portion of our budget. I usually speak at length about each of these items, but I would prefer not to do that this quarter. I'm going to be touching on them later on in the agenda under our budget as well as my director's report. So unless there are any objections or questions, I would suggest we move on with our agenda. I mean, I'm happy to talk more about them, but the one thing I did want to note is it's important to state here that these are the projects that are possible because of the support we receive from you, our local government members. That allows us to use the state money to fund these kind of projects. But if it's okay with you all and with the chair, I should have recommended that this item be left off. But I do like to have it under old business because it encompasses so much of what we do. Does anybody have any objection to me moving on this point?
All right, so our next item on the agenda is the 21st annual symposium.
Yes, this was held on May 14th, Friday, the normal sort of time, and we had a beautiful day for it. Like I mentioned earlier, we did do it virtually, and I was able to sort of broadcast from the deck out in front of my house on the river, which was a lot of fun, and we got close to 100 people participated virtually. We had some really great presentations from our chair, for one, as well as Marcy Hamilton from Southwest Michigan Planning Commission talked about dam removal projects, and we sort of under this broad heading of creating connections within the basin. I just noticed last night we've got close to 100 views of the live stream, like the YouTube video that was put up of it. And we had some great, I mean, you know, State Senator Sue Glick was on. I know several of you guys were there. So we had a lot of people that we want to hear our message. I think we're there. I don't know if anybody that's here cares to make any comments about it. I thought it was good, Matt, otherwise.
I did attend virtually, and both Dara and Marcy did a great job despite some technical hiccups, but they both did a great job. So if you get a chance, I would recommend viewing the.
Thanks, John. Yeah, the data that Dara shared about what we've seen in the Elkhart River where that dam removal is pretty, I didn't know about it. I talk to them all the time, and I didn't know about that, so it was cool. I was gonna leave out that technical glitches part, John. Those were on me. Yeah, but we pushed through. Anything else? That's all I got on the symposium. Thank you, Dara, for taking the lead on it.
Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it. All right, so the next item on the agenda is our water monitoring program.
Yeah, so this is exciting, and at the last meeting, I touched on some things around wanting to work this summer on monitoring, increasing our monitoring of quantity as well as quality. And since that time, I kind of alluded to we might be bringing someone on, and I'm excited to announce that we have. And Kate Barrett is here with us today. I don't know, you guys on the computer might not be able to see her just yet, but if you were at the symposium, you would have seen Kate introduce herself there. She had officially started just before that. I'm going to turn it over to Kate in just a second, but Kate's going to be working with us hopefully forever in a very part-time role at this point, at least. You know, this board's been talking about bringing on additional support at MACOG for a long time. We wanted that support to target one of those special programs. You know, I wasn't looking for someone to come on and help me with the administrative burden, although Dara sometimes thinks that's what I need. I want someone to come on who's going to enhance the programs and what we're delivering to the members. So, Kate, I'm just going to turn it over to you at this point. You can tell the folks a little about what you've been up to and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Matt, and so hi everyone, I'm really happy to be here. My name is Kate Barrett, and I thought I'd just give a little introduction about kind of my path to why I'm here. I'm not very good with the computer.
So I was gonna say, Kate and I are trying this really fancy tool to allow her to use her phone so she can advance the slides, but it's got a little delay in it, I think.
Let's see.
And I can help you.
Oh, there you go.
All right.
Thank you much. So my name is Kate, and I just joined the St. Joseph River Basin Commission as an aquatic ecologist, working part-time. I'm a recent graduate of Notre Dame with my PhD in biology.
Sorry, there are not meeting online. Maybe a couple of you closer to the
Ow.
just the audio.
You want to take my seat?
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do a little spot.
You can use my down arrow if you want. It's a little faster to slides.
Thank you. All right, sorry for the volume deficiency. Hopefully this is better. So like I said, I'm a recent PhD graduate from Notre Dame in biology, specialized in aquatic ecology. And after graduating, I thought, well, I really want to do work that has an impact community-wide and on dealing with watershed issues. And so basically in January, I sent literally a cold email to Dara saying, hey, I'm interested in water monitoring and kind of pointing me in the direction of the river basin, and kind of the rest is history. We had some really positive interactions. And so I'm really interested in applying my PhD skill set to local watershed issues. So I have a lot of experience in macroinvertebrate ecology, which our monitoring program will really center around, as well as this being used for biological monitoring. But I also have experience doing elemental analysis, so trying to understand the carbon and nitrogen composition of aquatic organisms, as well as statistical analysis to actually make sense of this. What does this mean ecologically, but what does this mean watershed management-wise? And so this forms the basis of what I'm hoping to do, which in terms of kind of when we think about water quality and taking care of our resources, this is really getting at primary prevention, where we want to keep our water healthy because water health is linked to our own well-being. So if the macroinvertebrates, little critters that live on the rocks and in the mud, are doing well, then we should be doing well. And so I was made aware, oh, this did not come out great, but I was made aware that there had been some water monitoring in the past through the St. Joseph River Basin Commission. And so a bunch of water chemistry parameters were measured from over, I think, 50 sites throughout the basin. Things were measured such as dissolved oxygen, conductivity, E. coli. And so I did a preliminary analysis for these sites and how they how are things looking. So I used a principal components analysis, which is a multivariate statistical technique that basically identifies gradients of variation that effectively tries to summarize the overall structure of the data cloud. And so looking at these data, so each point on this graph represents one of the 50 sites, and then those arrows going all over the place are different water chemistry and physical variables that are kind of driving the separation of these points. And so what appeared to me was 3 groups seemed to emerge on this, from this data set. And importantly, these sites were sampled monthly, but I'm using just overall averages, kind of an overall what's going on. And so 3 groups of sites appear to emerge in this figure. And what I noticed is that there's a group of sites on the left side of the graph that are being driven mainly by like high turbidity, E. coli, phosphorus, and nitrates, so it really seems to be driven by high nutrient value. And those sites tend to be clustered towards the east of Ligonier. And then we have a group of sites on the bottom portion of this graph that tend to be located west. And then those sites, that cloud of points to the right, tend to be kind of dispersed around the South Bend area. And so I'll be doing further, more time resolution analysis with this. But this kind of forms the kind of jumping board for thinking about our monitoring program that we want to implement. And so the biological monitoring program that we want to get started with is really using the macroinvertebrates shown up here in the top of this slide. We've got some stoneflies and then a dragonfly nymph to the right that are really the voices of the stream. And so what we want to do is establish 12 sites throughout the basin that actually go basin-wide, going beyond urbanized areas. So kind of in that vein of creating connections that was established in the symposium, really trying to capture what's going on in these other tributaries in terms of land use impacts that the macroinvertebrates can actually tell us something about. And so what we plan to do is to identify, go out to the field to 12 sites. We'll be doing site selection this month is the plan. Putting in samplers so that we can understand who's there. And then I'll be doing elemental analysis to actually look at kind of the composition of these critters to get at, okay, if we can understand the fundamental makeup of these things and kind of relate that back to what we know about the local soils and different land coverage, what can that tell us about potential impacts and maybe guide further investigations into portions that might need some help? Yes. Yes.
You're doing great. What I wanted to point out to people, because they might not be aware of this, is we're blessed with some really dense, really good biological data in the city of Elkhart, the city of Goshen, the city of South Bend, thanks to the municipal support of the program our chair runs. So we've got a lot of information about water quality in those urbanized areas, but we don't have it out in the basin. And the sites that she shared, what's it, 3-4 years ago it had ended, but we had just not doing chemistry analysis out in the more rural parts of the basin. And that's what some of what Kate was looking at. We've never had really good biological data out there. And so when she says getting beyond the urbanized areas, it's because we've got a great program already there that I want to make sure.
Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, those data, that's a really robust data set that exists, that is ongoing. And so we want to kind of use that model and really branch out. And again, using these macroinvertebrates as biological indicators. And basically the goal of this whole project is to basically use the taxonomy. So who are these critters? And the elemental analysis, what resources are sustaining them as a link between basically what's going on in the food web in these tribs and streams to human activities. And so we want to establish a baseline understanding of the resources and nutrient sources in stream food webs in relationship to habitat characteristics and land covers. And so from this, over time, we hope to develop maybe a predictive model that can be leveraged along with this existing water chemistry data that I showed in the previous slide. And so this also kind of leaps into what we're hoping to do. So food web analysis will be done with the stable isotope component that I mentioned, looking at land use impacts. But we're hoping that we can have the taxonomic work, because identifying these critters is very time intensive. I know that from doing when I did my master's, it can be really hours just identifying one single bug. So we're hoping that taxonomic work we can have professionals at Midwest Biodiversity Institute, or MBI, do that portion of the work. And this group is currently used by DAR's program right now. And so we want to be consistent with what monitoring is already in place. And I think with that, I will give it back to Matt.
Awesome. Unless anybody has any questions for Kate. So I'm going to learn a lot working with her if you couldn't figure that out. Okay. No problem. We're going to move into something that I'm hoping we'll have some action on, but I just want to say that, you know, working on the North Branch project with Bob Barr, who's here today, one of the things that he's been pounding into my brain is that relative to other streams in Indiana, a lot of our streams are in really good shape. And so some of what we're going to learn from this, I think, is where some of those key areas where we need to be more in a protection mode, rather than, we're going to have other areas that, yeah, what are we doing in the way of restoration? But there might be some where it's like more of our energy should be spent on trying to hold the line a little bit. So just a little background for why we're talking quality so much. It is the original purpose we were created for. And, you know, Kate's focus is going to be on that, but she's also excited about this flow stuff because connecting up some additional stream monitoring in the way of gauges with this information could be really powerful. So in the way of a request or an action, we got a quote from the MBI, which is the company that Dara works with for bug processing. And as I've worked with Kate on this and talking to James, the executive director at MACOG, because Kate's time is so limited at this point, and we want to build a program for the river basin that is sustainable beyond any one of us being there, we are looking to try and use outside sources when we can to cover some of the work. And so this is an opportunity to do one of the big expenses in doing a monitoring program, working with a company who has been Dara's go-to on stuff. And anyway, we got a quote from them. I included it in your packet. Basically, we're looking at about $12,000 to establish 12 sites for processing throughout the year. And I'm happy to take some questions. I'll probably defer some to Dara as he's worked with these guys a lot more. But I would just say that at this point, they invoice in the rear, but I'm looking for approval to kind of start working with them to enter into this, I'm just not even a formal agreement, but to do a purchase order basically to get this work done. Does anybody have any questions about program or starting to get this going? You know, we're going to talk budget here in a little bit, but you'll notice even coming out of last year, the water monitoring program is one of the areas we've been budgeting some money for this kind of thing. And so it's well within our budgeted amount, both what amount we have now and what I'm proposing for next year.
The location of the sites that have been determined yet?
Not yet. Geez, 2-3 years ago, Dar and I worked with looking at the map and maybe establishing some sites where he was thinking he might be able to expand his program. And so we've got to start there. I think Kate and I want to look there. I think those were about 8 sites. And then we also, Martin, want to have at least a handful. I think we talked 3 or 4 on the Michigan side of the line as well, especially where we've got water coming into Indiana from Michigan. And they also are great reference sites. You need to have a reference site that's kind of like your high quality one. Michigan does happen to have a few more of those than we do. So
I think that discussion we had a few years ago, the strategy is to kind of put them in prominent locations within different regions of the basin. So like in LaGrange County, for example, they might be put downstream of like an important lake or an important park that has good access or something. Absolutely.
We're really intentional about putting them on named water bodies that folks in the county know, and having some in every county that's a member of the commission. So, you know, Steuben, Noble, LaGrange would all have one that when you talk about the Little Elkhart Creek, people in LaGrange know. You know, talk about Pigeon Creek, we know what we're talking about in Steuben. So.
I'm curious about the ICI. I'm not as familiar with that.
Yeah. So the method that's used by our program, this is kind of pretty detailed stuff, I guess, to discuss with the commission, but our program uses a method, Ohio's method essentially to assess water quality for macroinvertebrates, bugs. It's called the Invertebrate Community Index, ICI, that Rod brought up. Rod's a biologist too, so this is stuff that's pretty interesting to him. But it's in looking at it and talking to folks, it's a more robust method compared to Indiana's methods for looking at streams. We put samplers out in the stream for a period of 6 weeks, and we'll get anywhere from 300 to 400 bugs all the way up to about 5,000 bugs on one sampler, and all of those are processed. With Indiana's method, it's like you might get about 50 or so individual bugs, and they sample and assess water quality based on those 50. So a lot more bugs, a lot more. You're looking at a bigger community with that ICI.
Habitat component, the same thing?
I think that, well, Kate and I'm going to help Kate a little bit with the protocols initially, but we're going to do UHCI called habitat evaluation index same time. So.
I know these folks did, when I talked to them, they mentioned that they were willing to come through here on their way to Chicago and they would help. Like, you already went through a training with it, but they offered to help Kate with that too. I said we had someone local who would probably help, but he was a real stickler about making sure you get the process right, otherwise the money isn't well spent.
I will say this organization, NBI, that we've used, we've gotten quotes from other groups, like consulting firms over the years. This group is a nonprofit organization out of Ohio. Their biologists are people that work for the Ohio EPA. And a lot of them are like really good, solid biologists that kind of their start was created through like the Cuyahoga River fire and that kind of stuff, like their water quality criteria and looking at macroinvertebrates and stuff that came out of the Ohio EPA. So these guys are really well trained. They're a lot cheaper than any private consulting firm could find to do this kind of work. So I think best route for the commission to go.
How many hours are you working?
Right now, times 20.
Week, a month, a week, a week.
I guess I don't know if it wasn't mentioned yet, and I don't know if it's going to come up in the future, but Kate had applied to the Indiana Academy of Science to get some funds to help her with her project, and was successful in getting that grant. I don't know, was it like a $3,000 grant?
It was like 2,600.
I think we had that in your presentation, I thought.
I had it.
Yeah.
I
I think we rolled through it. Yeah, that's important to note. So Kate's been here for like 2 or 3 weeks and she already brought in a grant for $2,500 to help cover some of this cost. I mentioned it earlier, I'll make one more. I would like action taken if we can to approve me entering into an agreement with these folks to do this processing later this summer after we collect bugs. I don't know if you won't give it to me, but that's what I'm looking for.
Ray Hoover, motion to hit this project.
Thanks, Ray.
Martin Franke, second.
Thank you, Martin.
So we have a motion and a second. I guess one thing that, Martin, this is kind of a little bit ironic.
I know I should have kept my mouth.
Yeah.
Same county.
Right, yeah, so at the last
Sorry
meeting.
about that. I can withdraw that.
Sure.
Let somebody else say.
At the last meeting, for those who weren't here, we discussed the idea of when making a motion in a second that they be made by people from a separate county. It was actually Martin's idea, which is kind of ironic. But so if we could have a motion from someone from another county, or a second, I'm sorry, a second from someone from another county. Okay, we'll go with Sue. So we have a motion in a second. Any further discussion on this? All right, can we do a roll call?
Dara Deegan? Oh, sorry, did someone online want to? Okay, no, all right. Deegan?
Yes.
Frank Lucchese?
Yes.
Bill Hartson?
Yes.
Jim Hess?
Yes.
John Roberts?
Yes.
Mike Kissinger?
Yes.
Jewel Weiss?
Yes.
Ray Hoover?
Yes.
Martin Franke?
Yes.
Donna Hunter?
Yes.
Sue McGee?
Yes.
Anita Hess?
Yes.
Jason Bepinger?
Yes.
Randy Sexton? Adam Bauer.
Yes.
Kieran Fahey.
Yes.
Paul.
Yes.
Sarah Longenecker, was that you, Kieran?
Sorry, you cut out for a second. Yes.
Chris Thomas.
Yes.
Lenny Lichty.
Yes.
Alicia Walsh.
Yes.
Mike Ruff.
Yes.
And Rod Edgell.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. That's 23 affirmative votes.
All right, motion passes 23-0. Thanks, everyone. We're going to move into new business on the agenda. The first item that we have under new business is the Wetlands Task Force representation. I'm going to start by trying to introduce this issue. It was something that I was involved with, and many of you probably received or saw an email from me about 2 weeks ago asking for, basically telling you guys that under this new Senate Bill 389 that we discussed thoroughly at the last meeting, we were asked, or it's a requirement, I guess, under state code for the city or for the River Basin Commission to nominate someone for the Indiana Wetlands Task Force. Because we had to make a decision by June 1st, which was 2 days ago for this meeting, I talked with Matt. Matt actually brought this to me and had some conversations with our legal counsel, Brandy, about the best way to move forward with the short time span that we have here and trying to get something going before our meeting. And I asked Matt if he would be interested in serving as the St. Joe River Basin Commission's representative. He agreed to do that. Based on the work that Matt has done through Senate Bill 389 and his understanding of wetlands issues, and also being a representative of the commission, I thought he would be the best person for this position. I guess Brandy's recommendation was that we could go ahead and submit that to the governor, that nomination, and at this meeting we could retroactively approve that, or if anyone would like for Matt not to be our representative, I guess we could disapprove of that and send another letter to the governor, basically rescinding that nomination. So I received a lot of positive feedback for Matt to be our representative. I didn't receive any negative feedback, so I went ahead and submitted that nomination.
Maybe we move to approve that.
Retroactive.
Retroactive.
Thank you, Ray.
What she said. I'm sure we'll go in the minutes, right?
Thanks, Ray.
Second from Adam Bauer.
Thanks, Adam. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this? All right, and I'd just like to, I guess, throw out there that obviously Matt's work through the Senate Bill 389 issue and keeping us all informed is certainly appreciated. With that, Matt, can you do the roll call, please? Sure.
Dar Deegan.
Yes.
Frank O'Case.
Yes.
Bill Hardson.
Yes.
Jim Hess.
Yes.
John Roberts.
Yes.
Kissinger.
Yes.
Ray Hoover.
Yes.
Martin Franke.
Yes.
Donna Hunter.
Yes.
Sue McGee.
Yes.
Anita Hess.
Yes.
Jason Pippinger.
Yes.
Randy Sexton.
Yes.
Adam Bowden.
Yes.
Kieran Fahey.
Yes.
John
Yes.
Law. Sarah Longenecker.
Yes.
Chris Thomas.
Yes.
Lenny Lichty.
Yes.
Alicia Walsh.
Yes.
Mike Ruff.
Yes.
And Rod Edgell.
Yes.
That's 23 ayes, no nays.
All right, motion carries. Thanks so much, everyone. We're going to move into the next item under new business. That's FY22 work plan and budget adoption.
All right, thank you, Dar. I think I put it in your packet sort of backwards. I stuck the budget first, but I'd like to start with the work plan. Under basic operations, things haven't changed in a couple of years here. This is the bare bones. When I got started, this is all we could afford to do, and try to keep that up, that we can still do all that stuff under our sort of core operations. So what I'd like to spend a little more time talking about is under our special projects. So this is where I said I'd get into some of this stuff. First, Underwater monitoring, with Kate's help, kind of flesh this out a little more, that we want to expand and support what currently exists in the basin, both with long-term biological monitoring as well as long-term water level and flow monitoring. So, the biggest changes probably are in there around the water monitoring, and you'll see that our budget reflects that. The other thing that's a little different from past, I kind of got a little explicit under municipal and partner support. It's the third bullet on there, and that is to establish flood resilience planning teams in the North Branch of the Elkhart River watershed to identify agreed upon strategies from the flood risk management plan. So we spent a lot of resources, got that grant, to do that North Branch study, and the next steps that came out of that was to try and work with actually all the communities individually though. So City of Kendallville, Noble County, LaGrange County, each one would be handled separately. And the first one, the big coverage would be Noble County. But to establish these resilience planning teams, have somebody from economic development, the floodplain administrator, probably county commissioner, probably surveyor, but small group that works together to say, okay, here's what the plan, here's some of the things the plan recommended doing. Which of these things could we swallow? What's workable here, what's not? And then kind of going from there to potentially adopting ordinances. They're good. They would, folks would review these ordinances that are specialists in planning and stuff like that. But I'd like to not lose the momentum we had down there in the North Branch. And I know one of the things that, Dara was the one that nudged me about it is things have been pretty dry this year so far. And so we're not getting a lot of, uproar as much down there, but we know that's short term. We know that pretty soon we'll be underwater. And we're going to say, what did we do about it? And so we want to make sure we keep working on that North Branch plan. So I put that in there as an item, and it goes along with all these other things that we'd like to do if funding and time allows. The other change was under planning and resource development, and that is the first bullet, which is completing functional assessments of the major tributaries to address problems and identify potential vulnerabilities. This is basically what we did in the North Branch. In the North Branch, it was a lot around quantity and flooding, but in some of the other tributaries, it'll be different. But doing a functional assessment, one by one, I mentioned at the last meeting, I talked a little bit about Pigeon Creek, had some conversations with Mike about what already exists out there. And but we've got a number of large tributaries to the St. Joe, and we want to sort of work through them one by one, because when we come out of those, we got more guidance, not only on what to do from a, I don't know if a soft end is the right word, but planning and zoning, that kind of stuff, but also where we might need additional information in the way of flow monitoring gauges, where particularly vulnerable areas are, that kind of stuff. We get hard data that comes out of that too that we can act on. So I'd like to see us continue with that, again, as funding and time allows. Pigeon Creek was an example, and whether that's the right place to start or not is to be determined. But we've got a number, like I say, of major tributaries that we can look at and study. So other than those two things sort of being explicitly added, most things are pretty similar to what we've had before. I included on here maybe as a separate breakout the drainage project I've been working on since I started, primarily in LaGrange, but a little bit been down to Kosciuszko County a couple times, and but still want to keep that momentum going as well. But otherwise, the FY22 work plan looks a lot like last year, with the exception of those things I noted. Does anybody have any questions on the work plan before I jump into the budget? Okay, so if you go back in your packet a page, is that proposed budget. Just a few changes to note. First, on the good news side, I talked to my friends at the state budget agency, and they're expecting the reserve amount to go down from 15% to 3%, which is really good for us. That means we go from receiving about 89,000 to more like 102,000 from the state throughout the year. So we got a little more money to work with from the state. We won't know the final number until July 1, but she said she'd be really surprised if it was over 3%. So I budgeted for 3%, and we can kind of see how it goes from there. On the not so great news side, our interest, I knocked that way down in the budget. We're just not getting the return. So this is what we would expect. Who knows, maybe things will turn around. But at this point, it was, I think, foolish to budget for $2,500 of interest when we're only getting about $500. So I changed that. Another big change on the revenue side, we did have this large grant from IU that was bringing in a lot of additional income. That grant has ended. We do have, thanks to Kate, a new little grant that we've got in there, so we do still have some special projects income up on the revenue side. Moving down from revenue into expenses, under basic operations, pretty much everything's unchanged from last year with the exception of a small increase on our office rent, and that's not because our office rent has actually increased. It's before we were being charged less coming out of our old agreement with MACOG, and so I knew that that wouldn't take effect until halfway through the year, so last year I didn't budget the full amount. We are now at the regular occurring amount of $7,000 a year for our rent to MACOG, so I increased that item. I also decreased the expenses around our bank service fees. We're not going to be paying nearly as much if we're not earning as much. And then just some really small changes to printing and travel and mileage of other basic operations. But, I guess the important thing to note on this particular section of our budget is I did keep it the same as $63,660. And that's an important number for us because that's the number that gets separated out and asked for from the members. I didn't feel that we were at a strong position, both coming out of the pandemic and still working with some of our communities to come fully on board to where we could really look at it. But I do know that in the past, we've had concerns around, hey, the longer we stay at that request amount, we might get stuck there if we're not careful. So, but for this year, I've kept that item the same for now. The last section I want to talk about would be special projects. So you'll notice that water monitoring, a little bit increase over last year, but already last year, I think we were planning for, I didn't flip the slide. I'm talking budget all this time. I'm sorry, everybody, especially those of you online and don't have printouts in front of you. Under special projects, water monitoring, thanks to the grant from Kate, we've increased that a little bit, so we have a little closer to $30,000 to work with on that program. We're holding the same on pretty much everything else, other than planning and resource development. I did have to pull that back because we don't have that IU grant income. So we're back down to around $20,000 for additional planning. But otherwise, things remain pretty much as they were last year. With that, I will ask, does anybody have any questions on the proposed budget for next year? All right, that's all I have. Yeah.
I'd like to work plan real quick. What's your timeline expectations for the North Branch Committee?
Good question. So I did ask for and received a quote from Christopher Burke, who helped us on the plan itself, and it came back at about $30,000 for everything, and they got it broken down by stuff. And I said, well, we don't have any single line item in our budget right now that's that high. I know in the past, one of the things, so I'm getting, this is going to get into the weeds a little bit here, Dara, but you asked. In the past, we have looked at the money that we have ended up sticking in our savings account because we didn't spend it the year before. And if we choose to do that, we can budget for a net loss this year, meaning we've got money in our savings account to fund some of this work. So if it was this board's pleasure to say, let's move forward, let's not lose that momentum, that's an easy adjustment to make to the budget as it is right now. But I expressed some concern that I don't have a line item with that much in it right now for planning and resource or for partner support, which this could fall under. And they did say that they could phase it, and that the first phase could probably come in more like 10 to 15,000, and then the second phase is like if we get good results out of that first phase and there's something to be done with the county ordinances and plans, then you can move into that as a sort of a second phase. So, we're going to talk purchase policy later, but if I had enough money in a line item like partner support to get them started on phase one, I would like to see us do that this summer. Without a purchase policy in place, I would, I guess, ask for this board's thoughts, first of all, but if others are supportive of it, I would ask for approval to start phase one of the next steps on the North Branch with the money that we have currently budgeted, or even some increase on one of those line items. So you that's where we're at, Nora. It's a good, I'm glad you asked it because I think that it does reflect what we approve in the way of that budget. If we did want to increase, I think either one, planning and resource development, it could fall under that, or partner support. But at this point, in order for me to say, yes, let's move forward on this, I feel like I need this board's approval. And that's one of the reasons we're going to be discussing a purchase policy is to make that clear, so I have clear guidance going forward.
In this case, you don't have a purchase policy, so you do need them right now.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm a little bit confused, so,
Me too.
Yeah. So I would like to move forward on that this summer. So to answer your question more directly, I would like to move forward on that this summer. And since we don't meet again until September, that does mean an action around approving me moving forward with the next steps of the North Branch.
do we have a proposal or?
We do. I don't have, I mean, I have it digitally in front of me, and I can share some information from it, but I don't have it printed off that I can share with the board.
I mean, you could put it up on the screen, I guess we could.
Just a brief summary.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me see, since I'm the one presenting, hold on, folks. I think I've got it right here. I don't know. Anybody at home doesn't have it? Okay. Got it. Phase 1 would include tasks 1 through 3 with a fee of $15,000. Phase 2 would consist of tasks 4 and 5 with a fee of $14,700. Part of task 5 might be able to be covered in phase 1. Okay, that's straight from email, and I will explain what these things are. So part of task 5 that we might be able to do with the initial $15,000 is training the trainer, which means some training for me on how I can work with local communities on their flood planning and resilience. But from the proposal itself, those items that I have to review, which I just said them, but let me put this up on the screen. So Zach, I'm going to be all right to stop the screen share and start this screen share. Okay, so it's kind of going to be a preview in my email, so it's going to be teeny tiny for folks, but I'm going to read, let me see, I can probably. So this is the cost breakdown. There's also a formal proposal that's a different document, but in that cost breakdown, he mentioned tasks, I think 1 and 2. Let me go back to that. Sorry, folks. Phase 1 would include tasks 1 through 3 with a fee of $15,000. So tasks 1 through 3, refining the project strategy to identify the participants, reviewing relevant plans and codes, so reviewing what's currently in place in Noble County, identifying strategies both from the plan and beyond, and then facilitating the meetings with the team. And he mentions this task 5, which is train the trainer. For those of you who can't see, we might be able to do some of that under that first part, but each one of those items had a cost to itself, which he's saying amounts to about $15,000. It's broken down here with $973. This is primarily staff time on their part. $973 for the first task, $7,097 for the second, $6,819 for the third.
And just to clarify, this is on the North Branch that you've already done your project on, and this is a continuation of that process?
Yes, so we completed a study, and out of that study, we identified vulnerable areas and stuff, but one of the things that it recommended as a next step was to work with the local governments on resilience strategies, essentially, in bringing together these flood resilience planning teams and facilitating meetings with them. So that's what this would be, having a consultant who's going to help us facilitate those meetings and identifying the people to be in them. And then reviewing all the plans that are there now.
So this $15,000 would be just for this summer, or would this?
The timeline on it, I can look on that other document real quick. The timeline was, let's see. Schedule. Within 6 months, so provide above services for this project within 6 months from notice to proceed. Okay, that's just more like when they would get started. I'm guessing it's as long as it'll take. I mean, there's a number of meetings, up to 3 flood resilience planning team meetings. But, you know, we'd be getting started this summer, and then as long as it takes to get those 3 meetings done with the analysis of the plans.
And you would include reporting back to the commission on what is occurring in those as they happen?
Absolutely, and I yes. Yes. Sorry, so I got the scope, the proposal open in another tab, which I could share if you'd like. Let me see, it says service tab instead. I have to zoom.
I mean, I think you've
Yeah,
done,
okay.
you've done a pretty good
All
job
right,
of summarizing
thank
it. Does anyone from Noble County especially have any questions or comments about this? Do you like the idea?
I like it.
Okay, great. Seems like a good, I mean, seems like something needs to be done. And we need to put that study to work and start getting with the people down there to get this going. So I think it's a good idea. Any other discussion?
Speaking from Consentagenda County, we'll be interested to see what the outcome of that work is, so we certainly would be supportive of that. Will this do that in Noble County, or is it going to be?
This one would just be Noble County. Yeah, and then LaGrange and the city of Kennelville would be the other 2 we would consider working that drain to this water body.
Well, I'm not looking on the presentation, I guess, for approval, are we gonna do it all under, work plan budget adoption, Randy?
Well, for that, you would want to vote on that separately. You would be, wanting a motion to approve the work plan and the budget, and then you want a separate motion to approve, I'm assuming just phase 1 of the proposed
Okay, great.
project. Yeah, perfect.
Ray Hoover moved to approve the plan and budget.
Do we have a motion?
Second.
Great, we've got a motion and a second to approve the work plan and budget for 22. Matt, when you're ready.
Yep. Okay. Dara Deegan.
Yes.
Frank Lucchese.
Yes.
Bill Hartson.
Yes.
Jim Hess.
Yes.
John Roberts.
Yes.
Mike Kissinger.
Yes.
Jewel Weiss.
Yes.
Ray Hoover. Martin Frompe. Martin, we are voting on I don't know, we're voting on a motion to start phase 1 of the North Branch. Thank you, Randy.
Sorry.
Do you want to abstain or you want to vote on this? So we're just voting on the
Approval of the work plan and proposed budget.
approval of the work plan and the
At the
proposed
cost
budget.
you had been discussing.
Sorry, at this point, we're voting on the approval of the work plan and budget that we've been discussing, not the.
I was in on that.
All
Yes.
right, everybody. Donna?
Yes.
Sue? McGee? Anita?
Yes.
Jason Pippinger, sorry. Randy Sexton?
Yes.
Adam Bowden?
Yes.
Kieran Fahey?
I'm sorry, I need one.
Okay, no problem. Okay. John Law?
Yes.
Sarah Longenecker?
Yes.
Chris Thomas?
Yes.
Lenny Lichty?
Yes.
Alicia Walsh?
Yes.
Mike Ruff,
Yes.
and Rod Edgell.
Yes.
Thank you. That's 22 yays, no nays.
Okay, motion approved. Thanks so much, folks. I guess we will, if someone could please, raise a motion for the approval of phase 1 for the North Branch, plan. That's on.
Yeah, the establishment of flood resilience planning team's proposal.
I'll second.
Great.
We have a motion from Martin Franke, LaGrange, and Anita Hess, Noble County.
All right, Matt, you're back up again.
Okay.
Roll call vote.
Zara Deegan,
Yes.
Frank Lucchese,
Yes.
Bill Hartsuff,
Yes.
Jim Hess,
Yes.
John Roberts,
Yes.
Mike Kissinger,
Yes.
Jewel Weiss,
Yes.
Ray Hoover,
Yes.
Martin Franke,
Yes.
Donna Hunter,
Yes.
Sue McGee,
Yes.
Anita Hess,
Yes.
Jason Pippinger,
Yes.
Randy Sexton,
Yes.
Adam Bowden,
Yes.
John Long,
Yes.
Sarah Longenecker,
Yes.
Chris Thomas,
Yes.
Lenny Lichty,
Yes.
Alicia Walsh,
Yes.
Mike Ruff,
Yes.
and Ron Edgell.
Yes.
22 yays, no nays, and another reason why we are using a consent agenda.
Yes.
Sorry. Thank you, everybody. That's very helpful. And, you know, between the budget we've got going already this year and what we're planning for, I think we'll be in a good position to move forward on this. All right. Thank you.
All right, I guess the next item on our agenda here is the electronic meeting policy discussion.
Yes. So can I take it from here?
Yes, please.
Oh, man. So we have had our own electronic meeting policy, not policy, we've had our own electronic meeting statute for a long time. And it was super complicated and I never completely understood it. So even before COVID, nobody ever did anything with it. During the pandemic or during the public health emergency declared by the governor, we were able to operate under the way others did, which is fully virtual, no problem. Well, that thing ended, and given the provisions that were made by the governor, they don't help us or apply to us in any way, really, so we're stuck back with our original. And it is one of these things, and this is, of course, I think, and Brandy will clarify this, that at some point, this can be a pleasure of this commission as to how they choose to proceed with this. But I feel like we've opened the Pandora's box with this virtual participation, and I don't know that we're closing it. Like, I don't know, I mean, for one, it's in our statute, and people, and honestly, we're getting participation this way, and I think we're working around it. I love the meetings being here in this room, but when folks can't make it, it is a nice thing. But as long as we're gonna do that, we have to follow our statute. And so Brandy put together a policy to try and clarify what that is, and I'll let her kind of, the way I understood it, she tried to make it
No, I'm just gonna talk, if you come closer to that.
yeah, grab my seat if you're gonna talk. So,
I'll move my chair there.
is to try to make it the least restrictive it can be. I mean, our statute has a bunch of stuff for making it more restrictive, but I think that's the way I kind of.
Yeah, that was my intention, was the statute does have a whole bunch of things that you're allowed to say, well, you can only do it under X, Y, and Z conditions, and you have to follow it, but you don't have to do that. It was an option they gave you. Some of the options were really strange. My personal favorite was one that you could put in your policy that people, if one of your members was electronically attending from some other public place, that you could put in your policy that members of the public could go observe the meeting there.
So they'd be in your office, Chris Thomas. They'd be hanging out, watching the meeting.
That was very odd. But yeah, so the one that I put together was about as broad as I could make it under the constraints of the statute, because your statute, essentially, you don't have to have a policy if you don't want one. But it's usually best to do so. Now, the new electronic meeting statute that got passed that applies to everybody who doesn't have their own, they have to have a policy. You guys don't, but it's probably best practices to have one if you're going to have a statute that says you can do it.
And if you've never looked at the statute, I'm begging you to pass a policy, because this policy, as complicated as it is, it's cleaner than the statute. So, some of the highlights from this, which we can't do anything about, I've talked about already. We've got to do roll call vote. We have to have a quorum present in this room. But once we do, the folks who are on the computer do count towards the quorum, but we still have to have 11 people from 3 different counties in this room. So
That's by our own choice, not anything beyond us.
the number is, and it does just happen to be a coincidence that 1/3 of our members being physically present is 11, which is also what we have set as our quorum. So we could set our quorum to be higher, which I don't want to do, but if you guys insisted, our quorum to be higher, and then 11 members could be present in this room, say we made it 12, 1 member could be present on the computer, and that would allow us to meet our new quorum of 12. But as long as we have a quorum at 11, that also happens to be the 1/3 that's required. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It was just a weird coincidence of the numbers. That was,
Yeah.
the statute doesn't say you have to have a quorum in the room. The statute says you have to have 1/3 of your body in the room.
Exactly.
And that just happened to be the number you picked for your quorum attendance. Essentially, one of the other requirements that's in the statute is that every member has to attend at least 1 meeting physically in the room. 1 meeting in a year. That's a very difficult thing to interpret because I don't think you can retroactively wipe out people's votes if they don't show up at the last meeting of the year.
But we do know that for that December meeting,
If you can show up in person before, you have to be here if you want your vote to count.
Right.
So if you attended electronically in March and you attended electronically here and you attended electronically in September, you need to be in the room in December or you won't be able to vote. That's a statutory requirement.
Are you gonna be tracking that?
yeah, I will.
Another piece of it is in the minutes, it has to say whether you were here electronically or physically, so it will be tracked one way or another.
Exactly. Yes. Forgot about that. Yeah, minutes will change to show who's present and how.
So essentially, those are the things that's just how the statute says, has to happen for people to participate in the meeting electronically and be able to vote that way. You have to attend 1 meeting physically, 1/3 of the people have to be in the room, and the minutes is there, they have to do roll call vote. Everything else that's in the policy was just my interpretation. Giving him 48 hours notice before the meeting to set it up.
Right.
That was one of the things you were allowed to put in your policy was a amount of time for notice to set the technology up, and I took advantage of that. Otherwise, there's a whole bunch of other categories of options. You could limit it if you want, but I did not do that in this draft.
So I find the continuous roll call votes to be redundant. Trying to find patience, I guess.
Yeah.
Which I don't have much patience to begin with.
You and everyone else.
Would there be, what would happen if, and playing with the thing, what would happen if we would say, we would write a policy that will allow for members to monitor the meeting remotely, electronically. But if they chose to do that, they wouldn't vote. Then would we get back to a situation where we could take just voice votes, aye, nay, all in favor, all opposed, that kind of thing? Seems like that would streamline things a little bit, right? I don't know the legalities of it, so.
The way the statute's written, you can limit it in any fashion you want that doesn't conflict with the statute itself. And the statute just flat out says, a commission member may participate by electronic meeting.
One of the things I think that causes all this is that you've got public that could be listening in. And it's their right to know how their representative is voting. And so if you don't have a roll call, in our town, we have roll calls all the time. And that's because we've got people that are outside zooming in on us, but we have to zoom out. And they want to know how each member in their ward is voting. And if you just go aye, all the voices blend together and names and everything, and that's what's driving this kind of stuff that we have to have, because the general public wants to know who's voting for what, so they can vote for you or not.
And just as an informational thing, the roll call vote, technically speaking, you probably should have been doing it all along, because the public access council wanted everyone to during this, there just wasn't any statute during the emergency that would have required it. The public access council recommended it.
So if you have 100%, so you have 100%
There's no
of the
exceptions
people
in there, unfortunately.
voting one way or the other, wouldn't it make sense that you only need to do a roll call if you have a conflict?
Yeah, but it would make sense, yeah.
Everybody says yes.
It would make a lot of sense.
The flexibility on that I'm working with is all votes during the meeting must be taken by roll call. So,
Yeah, I also find it awkward to have to approve minutes, financials, all that kind of stuff in one lump sum. So if you've got an objection to one piece of one of those things, then
All you do is pull that off.
that would be what we would do in that situation, would be, I request this
I
item be
still find
pulled
it
out.
awkward. I don't like it. Yeah.
Hey, Brandy, is there language in here that all of a sudden next March we get COVID-20 come down the pipe? Go, virtual again by governor, mandate, is there language in there so we can go back to electronic? Or do we still have to have the forum present?
That kind of depends on how the governor writes it, because the thing that caused the problem now, wasn't gonna get into this because it's kind of complicated and technical, since you brought it up. The thing that causes the problem is that when the governor extended a public health emergency in the last month and a half or so, he extended it again for June, which was kind of unexpected. But even halfway through May, when he had already extended it for the month of May, he put out another order that essentially said that I'm getting rid of the provisions of my earlier orders that's been being extended that said everybody can attend electronically all the time, 100%, because the state has taken care of it. The state legislature passed this new law, and then he referenced it and said that fixed it. It unfortunately did not fix it for you, because the way that the state legislature wrote the new electronic participation legislation was it added two new sections, one for general political subdivisions and one for general state agencies, essentially laying out similar to your statute under normal circumstances, this is how you would do it. And then added a third section that said, if there's a public emergency declared by the governor or your local government, then you can ignore those two sections that we just added and do it this way, which doesn't solve your problem. Yeah.
I have a question. Part of this recommendation talks about each member of the board must attend at least one meeting a year in person.
Yes.
As I understand the St. Joe River Basin Commission is chartered by the state of Indiana, and that specifies how many people from each county are going to be like a commissioner, a member of the drainage, and so on. How can you say that they can't vote because they missed 3 meetings in a row, when really that should be a function of the county and the people that are sending these representatives here? I don't see how you can do that.
I'm not saying philosophically you're incorrect, but the statute says each member of the commission is required to physically attend at least one meeting of the commission annually.
That's what the statute says, that created the commission?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're not saying they can't vote, it's that they can't vote electronically in that 4th meeting.
Right, if you do what you're supposed to and show up at the 4th meeting in person, you're fine.
You can vote. Yeah.
Okay, got
The statute, just for clarification's sake, the statute being our own bylaw? or
No,
some
I'm talking
statute?
the Indiana code.
Okay.
14, 33, 15 and a half. If I was referring to your bylaws, I would say that.
Okay, I appreciate the clarification.
And Brandy did, when she originally gave this to me, provided a resolution for the adoption of this policy, but then we kind of, after talking about it, realized how complicated it was. Thought, well, let's just put it on the agenda for discussion. But, whether we handle that whenever, that's the
I mean, if you're happy with it as it's written, I don't have, it would probably be better to just do it in September because it was on the agenda as a discussion item, but if you really, really wanted to do it today. And if there's things about it you would like it to change, if you want, I can list the things that you're allowed to alter about it, if you would like to hear them, some of them are using, but I already said that you can require a certain amount of notice to do it, which I did include in your policy, just to give Matt some time to set up the technology. You can limit the number of meetings to attendance. I don't think you can limit it to fewer than one, because the statute says that you are allowed to attend electronically. You could limit it to, you can only show up to a meeting electronically and vote one time a year if you wanted to, or 2 times. You do have that flexibility. You can, this is a really strange one. You can provide that if somebody is participating in a meeting electronically, they can't provide the deciding vote on anything.
Say that again.
You could make it so that the electronic person could cast the deciding vote on a motion. If it was that
Okay.
down
So
to
if
the wire.
it was half people, and the last person's electronic, they wouldn't be able to break that time. I don't know why you would ever want to do that, but you could. Let's see. You can require that if somebody voted via electronic participation, that they confirm their vote in writing to Matt within a certain period of time after the meeting. I voted this way on this item, this way on this item.
So you can do
Another one was the thing I said where you can provide that people can go to the public location where someone else is zooming in from.
So if you watch it from your office, we could make it so that LaGrange residents would be able to come there too. But again, it's more restrictive. It's not, so she's chosen the.
I didn't restrict it in any of the optional ways except to give Matt a 2-day head start on electronic setup.
Let's make it as least complicated
Yes.
as possible, not the other way around.
Yeah, that was what I was going for.
Right. I think it does too.
And then you can add any other limitations or provisions or whatever that you want that doesn't explicitly conflict with this statute or any others. If you wanted to do that.
Well, whether we like it or not, this is the new world. And this is what it's coming to. This statute or this policy that we're going to talk about would become null and void if the governor changes his mind and says that from now on you can have virtual meetings again. Because he's overriding our stuff just like he did the last time with our towns and everything else that allowed us to zoom in on everything and make our votes and all that stuff. This is for right now, we're not.
This is for normal
We're all good
circumstances.
now.
I unfortunately don't foresee the governor thinking that specifically in the future to have in mind, oh, maybe I need to include a provision in my order for these people who are not covered by this, what the state just did. So in the future, it may not work out like what you're saying, but.
I think the more realistic thing, Ray, is that Sue Glick or Dave Abbott or somebody that's an ally of ours
Call their state references, hey, maybe you want to amend
our statute so that we can have electronic meetings in it without a roll call vote, for example. You know, just that one little change to our statute would make this all, I think, a lot less painful. I don't think anybody would have a problem with us allowing these folks to join this way.
I don't think they'd be willing to do that because they added that as a requirement in theirs that they just made, but.
Gotcha, okay.
The one thing that would fix the problem that you just identified would be if they would change the new statute that discusses electronic meetings during emergencies to not just say it's an exception to just those 2 other statutes. It would be an exception to all electronic participation statutes would be helpful.
Well, I guess we have a couple options, I guess, today. We could pass the policy that Brandy has put forward. I don't know that we're going to get any better than the policy, as I understand it, that Brandy's put together. We could table it to the next meeting, maybe form a committee to go over that. If anyone has reservations, would like to know more about this policy, we could put them on a committee to figure it out, entertain suggestions. for what you'd like to do.
Move to accept regular.
Motion from Ray, second from Adam. I guess the next step, any further discussion at all?
Just to clarify, we were supposed to be, should have been doing a roll call vote.
Technically, the way you've been doing it has worked out fine, because if there were any no votes, you were going to take a roll call on that, and that has been made explicit, and it hasn't been necessary. You weren't doing anything illegal, you just weren't doing best practices that the public access council really wanted everybody to be doing, but you and every other board in the state was also. So, I can't think of anyone I know that actually was.
Further discussion? All right, Matt,
Okay.
roll call, please.
Dara Deegan.
Yes.
Frank Lucchese.
Yes.
Bill Hartson.
Yes.
Jim Hess.
Yes.
John Roberts.
Yes.
Mike Kissinger.
Yes.
Jewel Weiss.
Yes.
Ray Hoover.
Yes.
Mark Franke.
Yes.
Donna Hunter.
Yes.
Sue McGee.
Yes.
Anita Hess.
Yes.
Jason Pippinger.
Yes.
Randy Sexton.
Yes.
Adam Bowden.
Yes.
John Law.
Yes.
Sarah Longenecker.
Yes.
Chris Thomas.
Yes.
Lenny Lichty. Okay. Alicia Walsh.
Yes.
Mike Ruff.
Yes.
Rod Edgell.
Yes.
I heard that. That's 21 yeses and no nos.
All right,
That's a good question. Go ahead.
22.
21 yays, no nays.
Motion
Yeah.
Motion passes. We're gonna jump into purchase policy discussion.
Okay. All right. So I've asked Randy to stay here. This came up, it started with the bug processing contract. Actually, it goes back to the signs we purchased for our little street gauges we installed in the North Branch. But James, the executive director at MACOG, was asking me about our purchase policy and what, authorization I need for the board for what, and we don't have one. And it would be really helpful for me if we did. It would be helpful for MACOG to know what the director is authorized to do and what requires approval from the board. And in talking to Brandy about this, it wasn't as simple as I had hoped. There are kind of 3 different categories of the things one might purchase. Services is the one that we're most likely to be purchasing most often, and that's the one where we've had the most latitude in the state of Indiana. We got a lot of latitude there, and so Brandy and I both had some reservations about restricting that too much, but on the other hand, we definitely needed to adopt a practice as to when, within the budget, I'm allowed to, say, yeah, let's do that, planning in Noble County, for example. And then on things like the signs, those are considered materials and supplies, and so they've got, a threshold around them and some different processes when you cross it. So anyway, after meeting with the executive director of MACOG and Brandy together at the same time, Brandy was kind enough to put together a purchase policy, and I don't know, Brandy, if you want to share anything about it overall.
Like, I could just give kind of a
Yeah.
general overview
Please.
of how purchasing works with public
Yes.
funds. So, you mentioned 2 of the categories. This third one is called public works that I highly doubt you guys would really ever have anything to do with, because that mostly has to do with like construction projects, and you guys don't really own real estate. So that probably won't affect you, but I put it in here anyway because it exists. So there are a few statutory thresholds on how you are required to purchase supplies and public works. Services, as you stated, are the most unrestricted things. You are allowed to purchase services in any fashion you find as a board to be appropriate. So whatever you put into this policy for how you want services purchased, you can do whatever you want for that. I just put in kind of a basic, he can, up to a certain amount, he can buy them on his own, up to another amount, he can get them from you guys, up to a certain amount above that, he needs to get, like, proposals from more than one place. It doesn't have to stay that way, you guys can make changes to that, because that's something you can do however you want to do it. For supplies and public works, under $50,000, if you have a small purchase policy in place, you can utilize that policy to make it say, I want supplies purchased under this amount for any proposed procedure you want to use, like services, any supplies under $50,000 you can set up. They can do it this way. There's not a procedure you have to follow. $50,000 to $150,000 purchases you have to obtain, or you have to request quotes from 3 different sources that are known to supply whatever it is you buy. You don't necessarily have to actually obtain 3 quotes, but you have to solicit them. Above $150,000, you have to do competitive bidding or an RFP. RFP is also available for any of the other times you want to use it that you might feel it would be useful. That's the general outline of how purchasing works. And those numbers apply whether you're talking about supplies or the public works.
So I kind of took some of those similar thresholds. If you were able to see this in your Adobe PDF, I put in some comments that were kind of like ideas for starting points. And basically, this was in conversation with the MACOG executive director. For example, anything over $10,000 is probably not something, it isn't something that MACOG is going to front us. And so it's going to require coming before this board anyway to approve a claim, basically, from our account. Because for many of our small stuff, MACOG will pay for it, and then we reimburse MACOG on those invoices. But they're not going to do that for anything over $10,000.
And that's one reason that they wanted you guys to do this, was because I don't think you would ever do that to them, but it is technically a risk for them to be fronting you buying you stuff and then having you approve the purchase after they've done it.
Right, exactly. So that's why, he wants to know that for those little purchases that we're making, that I've got the authority to do that. And so having some kind of threshold in there for when it's okay for me to do it, and or then when it's okay for me to do it with the board's approval. And I just applied those same numbers to the services with the maximum threshold being consistent with the states for when something becomes a public work and you have to have 3 bids. For services, when we reach that $150,000 threshold, regardless that we're getting the board's approval, we need to go and make sure that we get some bids and stuff. But under $150,000, if we identify a source that we are comfortable working with and this board agrees, we're able to do that for anything between those 2 amounts. And then below a certain amount, if I've identified someone that I'm comfortable working with for services, and it's in between a meeting and it's in the budget, it's something that I can move forward on.
Now, just so everybody knows, you haven't done anything illegal with the way you've been buying stuff. It's okay. It's something an auditor would look at and frown at you for, but you're not gonna get in trouble for having MACOG do the purchasing like they have. But
So under the new policy, the contract with NDI that would come to the board, if it was under 10,000, you could.
If you use the amounts I suggested, if it was under 10,000, I could move forward with that.
yeah, and when I originally drafted it, I did not put in any of those discretionary amounts. I only put in the statutory ones and told Matt he needed to develop some proposed numbers for you guys.
And I just went, not only is it consistent with the number that MACOG would be comfortable with, it's also consistent with the policy that they're working on for their own board. So that's where I got the number from. Yes.
I guess my question is, how many times do we get to that high end, 7,500 to 10,000?
We have since I've been here. Everything's been under 50. Well,
She said, no, 100 to 10,000.
Oh, 7,500 to 10,000.
Where you have to wait a substantial length of time to actually come in front of the board to request it, or they have this covered in that.
So right now, there is no lower threshold really. Like, for example, if I understand right, like the signs that we purchased or the boards to screw the signs onto, I don't know, like.
She said, how many times has MACOG had to come that cost?
Oh.
Can you come back? Or you have to wait for
I guess to clarify, how many times have you been held up on doing something because we fall between under that 50 and 10,000. Because I know MACOG will go over 10,000.
Right.
They're willing to cover up to 10,000.
Right.
How many times have we used MACOG to kind of stopgap when we are not able to meet?
Well, on the MACOG covering it, I think they want you to have a policy for that under 10,000, just so they don't
Yes.
know that they're buying anything outside policy.
Yeah.
But you're asking how often do we exceed, like, is that number greater than that, where we're
How
at?
many times we use MACOG to cover, and then we get an invoice and we make up on that? Is it frequently, infrequently?
I'm thinking of, so when I think of the largest ones I can think of, I think there might have been a time where they covered our USGS stream gauge, which would have been about 4,000. And again, this might not be applying to you, but when we were holding the symposium in person, the meals and the rental space sometimes would get kind of high. I mean, probably not over 5,000, but it was getting near there, and they would front that kind of money.
So 10,000 is reasonable, that would pretty
Yes.
much cover everything.
So far, anything I've experienced, exactly, because of the kind of, once you reach that $12,000 MBI contract, it's gonna fall, and that's the kind of thing where I think, yeah, I would like the board to do it anyway, I mean.
Because, yeah, that's the other piece of it, is what's you comfortable with spending.
Right.
You know, you guys might be comfortable with a higher number than what he is.
And that doesn't mean I can't wait and bring it to the board if it's 7,000, and I'm like, I don't know, I mean, I think it just makes, lets you all know it can't go over 10 without coming here.
Right, now I have another board that they have a small purchase policy that's less restrictive than this one, it's like up to 25,000. They let their department heads make purchases off the open market without their approval. I can't think of one time that they've actually used it. Because their department heads are a little skittish about it, so.
Yeah.
Any questions, further discussion on this? I guess I see a few options here. One, we could approve the policy that's been presented today. We could form a committee, like I mentioned, with the last policy that we just approved. Or another option, I guess, would be putting that consent agenda to work and maybe have more time to review it, pop it under the consent agenda and approve it pretty quickly at the next meeting. I just thought I'd get kind of, I don't know, jazzy and throw it under that, or get that option too with our new process, but any suggestions how we move forward?
Well, I think that we should have policy, because God forbid Matt leave us, and we get somebody in that may not be as responsible as him, and it leaves the door wide open. If you've got a policy, then you stick by it. We have limits on our supervisors, managers, and stuff like that. It's better going to the board every time. If you've got honest people, it's a good, don't have to worry about it too much, because they know, even if it's over, or even if it's under, they'll come to you to make sure, just for their peace of mind. The policy is worth its weight in gold for everything, disciplinary actions, all kinds of stuff.
I just thought of something, like with Kate starting and something like, this is gonna be, I don't want to pressure you guys, but I just thought of like, you might get some bug nets and some, you know, little trays for holding, I mean, stuff with this grant. We just got a $2,500 grant to buy those kinds of things. Having this policy in place would make it clear that it's okay to buy those things as long as they're within the budget. Which would help us. I wanted it in there, but Randy said it's redundant, like but James has said the same thing. He's
I
like,
mean,
no,
it's assumed.
it's assumed,
that-
like, it has to be in the budget.
It would need to change the budget in order to have to require a vote from the board to do that, so.
Sorry, I know I'm being chatterboxes. So on this that you actually put out, there's actually not a mouse.
That's right.
So can you just run?
I
through them
can,
very
exactly.
quickly?
So, and you'll notice there's consistency in the threshold. The suggested amounts that I provided were under small purchases for item 1, that threshold being $10,000 or less. That's when I can move forward with MACOG's money and purchase things within the budget. Above 10,000 but below 50, I'd have to come before this board.
Well, you wouldn't even need MACOG to make the first. You could use their probation committee.
Okay. thought we had to approve every claim. This changes that.
That's the purpose of this, is so you
Okay.
don't have to approve every single purchase
Okay,
outright. And, I mean, that's what it would do.
okay,
Without board approval would mean the River Basin Commission money can be spent without board
okay.
approving that first.
Thank you for that clarification then. So, then the other numbers occur on the last page, and you, again, if it's below, the second number was 50,000.
50,000.
Sorry. 10 to 50. So on the front page, it's 10 and 10, so that there's no gaps. For purchases below 10,000, I can do that on my own. For purchases above 10,000 but below 50,000, it's when we need board approval. Above 50,000, the state regs kick in and it becomes public works.
Right, the other piece of that would be for those purchases under 50,000, whether he needs your approval or not, he wouldn't have to get quotes. He could just look online and see what the best deal is and buy it from them, or bring it to you and say, I want to buy it.
It makes that clear.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what the comparison pricing can be obtained via telephone, letter, email, fax, or website. That's what that does. Can be bought on the open market.
So you're okay with the $10,000 number, or are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, I guess so.
Just
Yeah,
your thoughts.
I know, I mean, like I
less or more.
Right, no, definitely no more. It's as much as I would want, that's for sure.
How about a two-tier threshold? Like if you get up to so many, whatever that threshold would be, you'd have to get just the approval of the president, vice president, secretary, treasurer. And if you go above that, then it would be the entire board. Maybe that might be an answer to the problem.
I can do that. I mean, that's not a problem. It's just not in what is here, so it would need to wait until the next meeting to get approved that way.
So if we do it that way, Matt, what, 10,000 seems a little much to you. I mean, where would you like points to be? 5 and 10 or?
Yeah, between 5 and 10 with the executive officers or something like that.
6 to 10 if you were over Symposium.
Oh, right. Yeah, between 6 and 10, something like that.
Does that put any undue responsibility on the officers?
And how would I get that? That would be,
You would want the executive officers as the senior, are they considered the executive committee?
yeah, there is some language in there.
So yeah, they are the executive board, so you would want a special meeting of the executive board that would need to be posted 48 hours ahead of time. And you post it, have the meeting 2 days later, and present it to the board.
So they would have to follow these same guidelines though for physically meeting, right?
It's for the electronic. I mean, it would still fall under this. It would still fall under the electronic policy.
So we could,
You have what, 4 people executive boards?
yeah,
You divide that by 3, if you only have to have a third present in person, so like, it's 4 people divided by 3, so maybe need 2 people in the middle.
okay. The other two could participate electronically, but would they, there's some language though about having to attend a executive committee meeting in person.
If there would be another executive board meeting.
Okay.
So it seems like it might be a little cleaner if you just pick a number between 5 and 10 that you think would cover everything that you've seen happen so far.
And not deal with this executive committee thing?
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I'm all for that. I mean, if folks are more comfortable with 7,500 than 10, that works for me. And then we don't need to go to that. I mean, that does sound a little bit more intimidating. I don't mind, like 7,500 would be great.
What was the original reason?
10 was consistent with MACOG's new policy, and it was the most that they would want on anyway.
I don't know if the suggestion was because Matt sounded uncomfortable with it or someone else was, but.
Leave it as 10. 10,000. It's fine with me. I mean, I can deal with it, Jason. It's not.
I mean, and this is all gonna be put in the approved budget anyway, right? There are items that are never going to be approved budget.
Yeah.
And so the commission's going to have a chance to kind of view this anyway ahead of time. And I know there could be, little details in there with whatever you're purchasing, but I don't see anything issue with the commission. We'll give you pre-approval of the budget.
So those numbers that of the 10,000 threshold, first page is similar on the last page. That's the threshold for item 1 under services purchasing policy. And then for item 2, it ranges between that 10 and 150, which is consistent with the state's, when something becomes, when you're required to get bids on stuff. We wouldn't be required to get bids, but again, we're saying that above $150,000, it's probably best for us to. Right.
I would move to approve the purchase policy as presented.
I'll second.
Need a Hess and Martin Conley.
There's a motion and a second. Matt?
Yes.
Roll call.
Yes. Darrell Deegan,
Yes.
Frank Bouquet,
Yes.
Bill Hartson,
Yes.
Jim Hess, John Roberts,
Yeah.
Mike Kissinger,
Yes.
Jewel Weiss,
Yes.
Ray Hoover,
Yes.
Martin Franke,
Yes.
Donna Hunter,
Yes.
Sue McGee,
Yes.
Anita Hess,
Yes.
Jason Pippinger,
Yes.
Randy Sexton,
Yes.
Adam Bowden, John Law,
Yes.
Sarah Longenecker,
Yes.
Chris Thomas,
Yes.
Alicia Walsh,
Yes.
Mike Ruff,
Yes.
and Rod Edgell.
Yes.
Thank you all. That's 21 yays, no nos.
Motion passes. Thank you very much. So the next item we have on our agenda is other business or updates from commission members, projects you might be working on, things that you want to bring to the commission.
I just got one thing, I've been working with Rod on a couple of layer things that I really haven't brought up. In various stages, but I've got a 2-stage ditch, probably about 1,500 feet. 1,500 feet of a 2-stage ditch in St. Joe County on a gas ditch.
Headwaters of Judith Creek. Cobus.
Cobus Creek, yes. Headwaters of Cobus Creek, working with St. Joe County Parks. They have a large tract of property they bought, and going to be working with them maybe to do some work on their property as well with that 2-stage ditch project. Again, these are all layer grants, like the river management grants, going through the state of Indiana to do some of these work, some of this work. We're in Boggle Creek, St. Joe County Parks again to do a pretty cool area bank and a bluff repair and protect a pedestrian bridge at Boggle Creek County Park. And then also working with private subdivision, homeowners association kind of group to work on Woodward Bayou, which is where Woodward Ditch enters the St. Joe River in South Bend. It might not be, I don't think that's Mishawaka. Yeah. So here again, all 3 of those projects are on various stages between diagnostic studies and or funding the projects themselves. So Rod and his cohorts have done his on those 2 projects.
Thanks, John. Thanks for your hard work. Any other updates from commission members? Right.
No, it's tough. That's time of the meeting. It's hard. I apologize. I've tried going over. I'm going to be super fast on this. The director's report. I do all kinds of stuff. You guys see me out there. This is, I've been working with LaGrange County Drainage Board a lot. Legislators, we had a great amendment on Senate Bill 389. Assisted MACOG with the hiring Kate. Did tree planting in Middlebury, and we're looking at some potential forestry partnership with Indiana DNR. And then lastly, I'll just say, working with St. Joe County, Michigan's Conservation District and a company called Waterways on potential stream view data for, at this point, be the main stem, but my vision is a lot of our regulated drains would be included. If you've ever used Google Street View, where you fly that little guy in and you can look around, we're gonna have that for the main stem of the St. Joe, and I'd like to get it for some of our regulated drains too. So when we're at a drains board meeting, fly on in, spin around and get some, you know, when possible. It might be some of our larger systems, but that's a place to start. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. I've got a number of items listed, but those are the highlights of things that are not covered on the agenda. Any questions on that?
Thanks a lot, Matt. And, as someone who's the chairman and gets to work closely with Matt, he's part-time, technically, but he's not really part-time. I think the moment you probably know that he really works hard. So
that was something that I meant to bring up on the director's report. And not just that I'm part-time, but some of you who know me well know this, and if you've ever seen my presentations, you always hear it at the front end. But the reason that I'm so passionate about this, the reason that I donate time a lot of times, is I love being on the river. And over the next 2 months, I'm going to try hard to pull back, and I'm just putting it out there to you guys because I'm focusing on this other big passion in my life, which is canoe racing. And I've got this giant canoe race coming up at the end of July, and I have been training already, and I'm going all out this year. I'm making predictions for the podium this year. It's huge. And so I'm really going to try hard, and Kate's going to try and help me over the next couple months to pull back just a little bit at, but it feeds this. I mean, that's what feeds why I want to do this stuff. It's love being out there on the river. So
that's why I'll be there to give you.
Yeah, John's been there before. And you all are welcome. Come up to all the Sabo River at the end of July. Anyway, if you ever want to get, I got a whole little story I share every year, and you're welcome to get that if you're interested. Get me talking about canoe racing in the meeting will really go long. Thank you, Dara. Sorry, everybody.
thanks, Matt.
Sorry, I have one thing that I guess I should have mentioned in other commission updates. It's not anything that our group specifically is working on, but the Tiffany Watershed Foundation, based in North Webster, was able to get the Smithsonian the Waterways Project. It will be at the North Webster Tiffany Township Library from the June 26th to the August 7th dates. So if anybody wants to check that out, I know the Watershed Foundation did a lot of work to get that there. It's supposed to be a pretty amazing project.
What is it? It's really.
It's the Waterways Project with the Smithsonian. It's going to be an interactive exhibit on water and how it's working in our communities and what groups like us are doing for the waterways. But it was, Smithsonian offered it, I believe, 6 counties across the state. And and they were hoping and focusing for those smaller communities like North Webster area, and the Watershed Foundation was able to be one of those 6 communities. And I believe the next closest would be down around the Indianapolis area. Nobody else part of the north was able to be one of those 6. So.
It was in the basin about a year or 2 ago, just before COVID, but on the Michigan side, in Niles, Michigan, and it is really, really cool. Interactive display, and they always do a panel that's local, so it'll be on, our area, at least one big panel. It's great for kids if you got a chance to check it out.
Thanks, Jewel. Any other items from the floor? Anyone want to give us some updates? People in the audience?
I participated in the graduation from the Indiana Watershed Leadership Academy on this past Wednesday. It was a very intense experience. It was a very time-consuming experience, but a very rewarding one, and I'd like to thank the commission for paying my tuition to that this year.
What project did you work on? Is there like a team project you work on?
It was a little different this year, I think, because it was completely virtual, online experience. There was no actual physical meeting. My 2 partners that I did the group project with, I'd never met in person, so talked to them on the phone and emailed a lot back and forth. So I don't, at some point, that PowerPoint and brochure that we designed for that should be available online, but I don't know if it is yet.
Thanks, Mark. Any other items?
Yeah.
Maddie?
Hi all, I'm Aaron Sawatsky Kingsley. I'm the director of the Goshen Department of Environmental Resilience and the City Forester also. I'm interested here at the beginning of the meeting to kind of welcome you all on behalf of Goshen, on behalf of the mayor who couldn't attend, on behalf of Jason Kaufman, who also couldn't attend. But I do want to welcome you all and thank you all for being here at Goshen, and to thank you all for the important work that you do for the watershed that's part of it. We know more and more about the critical nature of how our watershed is cared for, the way that the Elkhart River is cared for. Manny and Jason have been doing some really important work here at Goshen just over the past several months here, covering different kinds of pollution that we need to be addressing. So I just want to thank you for the time that you all give, Matt, and all that you give lots and lots of time. We also are working on a flood resilience plan here for Goshen. So I highly encourage that work to go ahead. I slipped in here and I heard a little bit of Gail and that discussion about tree planting, of course, is near and dear to my heart. That's where my experience began and continues to grow. So just on behalf of Goshen, thank you for your time and your efforts. Hello, cousins. Mark. All right, thank you.
Aaron, if we could, let's connect on your flood resilience plan and this forestry project that we're talking about with IDNR. I'd love to get together on that. Great. All right.
Thanks, Aaron. Any other items from the floor? Hearing none, that leads us to the end of the meeting. This is kind of tricky. I was in Brandy's ear a minute ago, and apparently we have to do a roll call vote to end the meeting. However, we can exit early if we get the people online or without the roll call vote to exit the meeting right now. But we certainly appreciate
the members who are online.
But if you're willing to log out and get off, we don't have to call a roll call vote.
There goes Chris. Everybody left, Zach? That was it. All right. Hey, I just want to say to those of you who showed up in this room, especially now that they're not on, although I know I'm still live streaming, thank you guys so much. This was a long meeting. I will not do this to you again if I can help it. Thank you for making this trip. It wouldn't be possible without your time. Thank you, guys. All right, we need a, still got a motion though. I just want to move your Ray Hoover, Joe Weiss second. All in favor? No. All in favor?
Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody.